Alright, BloomBurrow, we have a new set coming up and I'm going to share my thoughts on the mechanics and the set as a whole. So the first mechanic is expend. That means that when you spend 4 mana to cast a spell, you get a bonus. And so you can't just float mana and do this, you have to spend a card to do it. And my thoughts on expend is that it's going to mean that permanents are going to be much better, because permanents you can just play at any time. So I think that creatures, equipment is going to be good, and I think that counter spells and to some smaller extent removal is going to be less good with expend, because with expend you want to cast a card during your turn to get the bonus. You can still get the bonus during your opponent's turn, but a lot of these cards wants to attack. For example, here's one that gets a +1/+1 counters. There is also a common that gets +2/+1, and then you want to attack with it. So I think that counter spells is going to be less good in this form because they're not going to enable you to expend. Yes, of course, expend is a red-green mechanic, but there are some monocolored cards that expend too. So if you're blue-red or blue-green, you're not going to get the bonus from the counter spells. And that means that you want to have a deck full of permanents so you can cast it anytime so that you can expend whenever you want to. Next we have Forage, which is a graveyard mechanic, which means that you exile cards from your graveyard, namely free, or sacrifice a food. So this is basically a very green-black theme, because green-black has been a food mechanic for as long as it's been in Eldraine, and green-black is also a graveyard mechanic. My thoughts on Forage is that it is a parasitic mechanic, and what I mean by that parasitic is that the more you have, the less valuable the another expend card becomes, because you can't just exile completely from your graveyard without having to run out of cards eventually. So it's sort of like Delve. So some mechanics are like allies, they get better the more you have. So you can just, if you're drafting an ally deck or an elf deck, you want as many of that types as possible. That's not the case with expend. It's a parasitic mechanic. So you want to have a lot of ways to make food and fill up your graveyard, but you can't just fill up your deck with a bunch of expend cards. This means that any card that self-mills is decent. There is a common 3 to Death Touch that mills 2. If you have a card that mills your opponent, it's going to be less good against green-black. And I also think that the way that exiling 3 cards from your graveyard and sacrificing food works is that it sort of lends itself to a more grindy deck, because the longer the game goes, the more cards go to the graveyard, and that means that the Forge gets better. So I think that graveyard mechanic sort of naturally lends the person who drafts the graveyard mechanic to have the game go a little bit longer. We have gift, and this is in every color. It means that you give your opponent some stuff. It can be a token or drawing a card, and then you get an extra bonus. So I think that since a lot of the cards that give your opponent a token, that means that control deck is going to be less good, because if you are playing a control deck, it's kind of hurtful to give your opponent a token because you are trying to answer your opponent's things. That means you just have another thing to answer. I think the gift mechanic itself leads to more aggressive games, because you don't want to be a controlling slow deck and use the gift to give your opponent stuff. Also, it means that go wide decks become a little bit better, because if your opponent giving you tokens that may not do that much on their own, anything that can go wide is strong. We're also going to get to the go wide mechanics later, but there is a common white inspired charge effect, +2/+1, and then an extra bonus. And I think that the gifts your opponents might randomly give you is going to make that card even better. Now here we come to the next mechanic, which is Offswing, which is another mechanic that creates a token, but this time it's on your side. So it gives you an exact copy of the card plus another 1/1 version of it. And I think that this is going to make the format more aggressive, because if all these tokens are flying around, it's harder to be a control deck. Control decks usually hates when your opponent's spreading out things over multiple bars, because you kind of have to answer everything, and spot removal may not do the thing. And also this means that the inspired charge card, the 2 white gives +2/+1, is going to get even better. So I think that Offspring also means that you can play a little bit more lands, because it is a kicker's version of Swords. So if you are flooding out, you can play the Offspring card, so you're not even getting hurt that bad. So I think that Offspring is going to make the format a little more aggressive and a little more go wide. And I think that you may have to think about that. Another reason to play more lands is classes. These are sort of like enchantments that you have to pay extra to get an extra effect. And if you're flooding out during a lot of lands, you can level up these classes and get this last chapter. So class is sort of another man I think that may make you want to play more lands. We've seen classes before though. Threshold is a mechanic that I'm going to be honest, I think it's a trap because I think it's going to be hard to get to Threshold. And I think that a lot of the cards from black is going to be stolen by the green-black drafter. So if you want to self-mill, well, the green-black drafter wants to do that as well. And I think that Forge is just a better way to do it because instead of playing like a card that you have to wait a long time for the bonus, you can get the bonus right away for the green-black deck. So I think that Threshold is going to be a little bit of a trap. I probably would try to stay away from it. Maybe the Threshold cards are just very pushed, but from what I've seen, it doesn't seem to be the case. So I would kind of lean away from Threshold. Another card though is Mind Whisk, because it is a blue card that surveils one, and then the green-black drafter can't take it. So be on the lookout for some blue cards that mill you, because then you're the only one who wants them. Valiant is a version of Heroic, and it triggers off abilities as well, so just keep that in mind. And Heroic means that you are stacking up on one card, and that by itself leads to faster games, because either your opponent answers the card or doesn't, and if they answer it, they probably win, and if they don't, they probably lose. So Heroic sort of makes the format more aggressive because you're stacking up on one card. From what I've seen, the Valiant seems to be a little lower on the payoff side than in Teros, so I think we're going to see less Wingsteed Riders and more like value cards with small incremental advantage. And then it becomes less of a heavy theme and more like a minor theme. The thing about Heroic is that when it's all in, the format tends to be all about that. And when it's more low key, like it was in Tears Beyond Death, I think it's going to be more like a minor thing. So I'm looking to this to be a minor thing, but it is inherently an aggressive mechanic because if you are putting a lot of stuff on one card, you want to turn it sideways and win. You don't want to stay back and block with it most of the time. Alright, I'm going to go down to the hybrid colors because hybrid we haven't seen for a while, and I have some thoughts about hybrid here and the way hybrid is going to work out in the things you want to take from it. So I kind of sort the hybrid cards in three categories. The first entire one category is the card you want to play in both. Of course, they're awesome in the color they are, but you can also play them in any of the supported colors. Let's take Head of the Homestead, for example. I think this card is very good in green-white, very good in white, and okay in green. Still pretty decent in green. So this is a card that's pretty high pick because it keeps you very flexible. It leans you to both being green-white, and that's also a go-wide theme. This is also a card that makes you go wide. But I also think it's great in white and also okay in green. So if you take this first pack, not that this is probably going to be the best pick one, pack one, but I think if you take it, you're pretty flexible. Another card I have in this category is Young Blade Bruiser. I think this card is going to be good in green, it's going to be good in red, and awesome in red-green, because I think Expend 4 is a mechanic that works in every color combination. So if you are red-black, I think this card is totally fine. It's a 5 mana card that attacks as a 6/6, and most red-black decks kind of like that. Then we have the second tier of hybrid cards, which are like Pond Prophet. I think this card is very good in green-blue. It's okay in green and blue, because I think that this card is like on the verge of being playable. So if I'm having like a 9 forest 8 swamp deck, I can still see playing this card because it's a 1/1 that replaces itself, and if you jump block with it, you get a fodder for forage. It's also, if you are red-green, you can play it and dig towards having to get the 4 for the ability. So I think the Pond Prophet is sort of in the middle. It's a card I'm mostly gonna play in green-blue, but I still could see playing it in some other deck. And then we have the third tire, which is like the Mind Drill Assailant, which I would never play in like white black or red black. I think it's just too weak of a card. This is 2 and 2 is a hybrid for a 2/5 with fresh soul, and you can surveil one. I would only play this in blue black, and I wouldn't even then be too excited about it. I think that also Tempest Angler is the same. I would only play it in red blue, because then also the card itself lends itself to being like a prowess deck, and this is not like a red green card. Right, let's take a look at some of the mana fixing we have, because that usually shapes the format. I'm mostly thinking about 2 cards. Fountain Port Bell, 1 mana artifact. When it enters, you may search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it on the card on top, and you can sacrifice it 1 mana and draw a card. So you can decline. Late in the game, you can actually decline to get a land and just get a card that could be a land, but it has like 66% chance of being a non-land. So I think this is going to be kind of a good card, because it is sort of like a Traveler's Amulet that's with upside, because Traveler's Amulet always gets you a land, so when you draw it in the late game, it's kind of awkward. This card always cycles, and remember that cycling a card in this set is probably going to be a little bit better than usually, because it works with Forage, it works with Self-Mill, it works with casting non-creature spells, and yeah, it works with Frestle too. So I think that cycling, putting a card in the graveyard in this set kind of works with a lot of cards. Another card here I want to talk about then for mana fixing is 3/3 Mascot. 2 mana for 2/1 with Changeling, so it's all colors. And you can pay 1 and add 1 mana of any color, activate only once each turn. I remember the Pact Beast from Zendikar Horizon being kind of good. Not like an awesome card, but very much better than it looks. And I think this has sort of the same vibes. It's gonna trigger all your tribal stuff, and it's gonna fix you. And if you're looking at the lands, we don't have much mana fixing. The card that stands out are the card here, Uncharted Haven. Comes to play tap, you choose a color, you add one of the chosen colors. So it's like the Mirage Mesa from Outlaws of Thunder Junction, except it's not a desert. But I think that this card is going to be a pretty high pick, because we don't have any tap lands that tap for any color. So to summarize, I think that the format's going to be kind of aggressive, and my reason for that is that Offspring creates a lot of bodies. There are gifting, giving your opponent tokens. There are some good go wide cards. The 2 white gives creatures +2/+1 and an extra bonus. I think that this deck, and Heroic is also an aggressive mechanic. I think that Threshold deck's gonna struggle. I think the Forage deck could be okay if you're just having a lot of defensive speed. But my initial takes on the format is that it's gonna be pretty aggressive. We'll see if I'm right or wrong. So this was my thoughts on BloomBurrow. I thought it was better than doing an entire set review, which I probably will do for the next set.